Commander Zefter had been flying patrol ships for over 200 years, but he had never seen anything like the Ghost ship that drifted in the void near the edge of known space. The metal hull was dark and cold, its surface covered with strange marks that looked like writing but matched no language in the galactic database. His crew of Valkyrie soldiers moved carefully through the silent corridors, their weapons ready for anything they might find inside. The ship was empty, but not abandoned. Someone had turned off all the power systems and locked down everything before leaving. The sleeping chambers were built for creatures that walked on 2 legs and had 2 arms. But no species in the galaxy looked exactly like that. Dr. Kira Thane floated through the main corridor, her scanner beeping as it recorded everything. She was the best at finding old things and figuring out what they meant, which was why the Council always sent her to investigate mysteries like this one. The ship's computer was still working when they powered it up. The language was completely unknown, but the computer was smart enough to start teaching itself how to talk to their systems. After 3 days of work, they could finally read some of the records. The ship belonged to something called humans, and they had been traveling between the stars for a very long time. The records talked about a place called Earth where they came from, and how they had to leave because their sun was dying. Zefta read through the translated files, while his ship flew back toward Council space. The humans wrote about exploring new worlds and meeting other species. They seemed peaceful and curious about everything they found. Their technology was different from anything he had seen before, simpler in some ways, but also more creative. They built things that lasted and worked well without needing constant repairs like most Council equipment. The more he learned about humans, the more confused he became. If they had been traveling in space for so long, why had no one in the Council ever heard of them? Every species that reached the stars eventually made contact with the galactic community. It was impossible to stay hidden when you were moving between star systems and building colonies. Yet somehow these humans had vanished completely, leaving only ghost ships, like this one drifting in empty space. Dr. Thane found something very interesting in the ship's medical bay. The humans had left behind samples of their own biology, probably for other humans to study if they ever found the ship. She ran tests on the genetic material and discovered that humans were remarkably similar to several other species in the galaxy. They could probably breathe the same air and eat similar food. This made their disappearance even stranger, because compatible species usually did well when they joined the galactic community. The sleeping chambers told a sad story. Families had lived on this ship, traveling together towards some distant destination. There were toys for children and personal items that people kept to remember their home world. The humans had not been running away from war or disaster. They had been looking for a new place to live and grow. The ship's database contained thousands of stories, songs, and pictures that showed a species that loved art and beauty and learning new things. When they reached the Council station on Kepler Prime, Zefter faced a difficult choice. Standard procedure required him to report everything to his superiors immediately. But something about the human ship made him hesitate. The Council was not always kind to species that they considered weak or primitive. If humans really were out there somewhere, maybe it was better if the Council did not know about them yet. Dr. Thane had the same concerns. She had studied many extinct civilizations and knew how the Council dealt with species that caused problems. The official records always said that dangerous species had destroyed themselves or been eliminated by natural disasters. But she had found evidence that some of those species had actually been wiped out by Council forces. The galaxy was a big place with room for everyone. But the Council preferred to keep control by limiting how many independent species existed. The human ship contained no weapons and no military technology. Their computers held records of peaceful exploration and scientific research. These were not conquerors or warriors, just travelers looking for a new home. If the Council found them, they would either be absorbed into existing member species or quietly eliminated. Neither option seemed fair for a people who had already lost their original world. Zephyr made his decision while standing in the human ship's command center. He would file a report about finding an unknown derelict vessel, but he would not mention the human records or the evidence of their civilization. Dr. Thane would continue studying the ship in secret, trying to learn more about where the humans might have gone. If there were still humans alive somewhere in the galaxy, they deserved a chance to survive without the Council interfering. The mystery of the humans haunted both of them as they returned to their regular duties. Somewhere among the stars, an entire species had vanished without a trace. The galaxy had forgotten they ever existed, but their empty ships still drifted in the void like monuments to dreams that had been lost. Neither Zephyr nor Dr. Thane could have imagined that the humans were not extinct at all, but were instead watching and waiting for the right moment to remind the galaxy that some legends were based on truth. Captain Alex Carter stood at the observation deck of the massive ship New Horizon and watched the stars that no council member had ever seen. These were the dark stars beyond the galactic rim, where space was cold and empty and perfect for hiding. An entire civilization. For over 200 years, humanity had been building their new home in this forgotten corner of the universe, waiting for the day when they could return to claim what had been stolen from them. The Great Exodus had begun when Admiral Kate Morrison made the hardest decision any human leader had ever faced. The Council had welcomed humanity with smiles and promises, but their true intentions became clear very quickly. They wanted human technology and human worlds, but they did not want humans to remain independent. The choice was simple: submit to absorption into the Council system or face complete destruction. Morrison chose a third option that no one expected. Lieutenant Ben Rodriguez monitored the quantum communication arrays that listened to signals from the galactic core. Every day brought new intelligence about Council movements and policies. The younger species were becoming restless under Council rule, and several rebellions had started on remote worlds. The time was almost right for humanity to make their move, but they needed to be absolutely certain they could succeed. There would be no second chance if they failed. The human fleet had grown beyond anything the Council could imagine. While they thought humanity was extinct, the survivors had been building warships in the darkness between stars. Every human colony contributed resources and personnel to the growing Armada. They had learned from their first encounter with the Council and designed their new technology specifically to counter Council advantages. Speed, stealth, and precision would replace the brute force approach that had failed before. Colonel Lisa Wright finished her final inspection of the reconnaissance ship, Shadow Dancer. Her mission was to slip back into Council space and gather information about fleet positions and defensive systems. The Council had become lazy during humanity's absence, spreading their forces thin across too many systems. They no longer expected serious military challenges, which would make them vulnerable when the human armada finally revealed itself. The human colonies in the dark stars were unlike anything that existed in Council space. Every world had been carefully chosen and terraformed to support maximum population growth. Cities were built underground or in artificial habitats that could be easily defended. The entire civilization was designed around the principle of mobility, ready to pack up and move again, if necessary. They had learned the hard way that survival meant always being prepared for the worst. Dr. Amy Harrison worked in the research facilities on New Terra, developing the weapon systems that would give humanity an edge in the coming war. Human creativity had flourished during the years of exile, producing innovations that Council scientists had never imagined. Their new energy weapons could cut through any known shield technology, and their defensive systems were designed to absorb and redirect enemy fire rather than simply blocking it. Captain Jake Thompson commanded one of the supply ships that moved between human colonies, keeping the fleet fed and equipped. The logistics of hiding an entire species while building a war machine were staggering, but humans had always been good at solving impossible problems. Every ship captain knew their role in the coming operation, and every colony had contributed something to make victory possible. The human children born during the exile grew up with stories of Earth and the galaxy their parents had been forced to abandon. They trained from an early age to be soldiers, engineers, and leaders in the war that would determine their species' future. Commander Ryan Mitchell had been one of those children, and now he led squadrons of fighters whose pilots had never seen the inside of Council space, but were ready to die for the chance to claim it. Admiral Morrison reviewed the final plans for Operation Daybreak while standing in the command center of the flagship, Spirit of Earth. The operation would begin with simultaneous attacks on 40 different Council systems. Designed to cripple their ability to respond effectively, human forces would emerge from hiding places throughout the galaxy, striking quickly and disappearing before Council reinforcements could arrive. The goal was not conquest, but recognition, forcing the galaxy to acknowledge that humanity still existed and deserved its place among the stars. The waiting was the hardest part. Humans were not a patient species by nature, and spending centuries in exile had tested their resolve to the breaking point. But they had learned discipline during their years in the darkness, understanding that premature action would doom their children to permanent wandering. The time for action was approaching, but it had to be exactly the right moment. Captain Rachel Stone calibrated the targeting systems on her destroyer, Retribution, while her crew ran final combat drills. Every human warrior understood that they were not just fighting for themselves, but for the memory of everyone who had died during the Exodus. The Council had tried to erase humanity from history, but they had only succeeded in creating an enemy more determined and dangerous than they could imagine. The quantum communicators suddenly came alive with signals from across the galaxy. Council forces were moving to suppress new rebellions, leaving key systems vulnerable to attack. The moment they had been waiting for had finally arrived. Admiral Morrison gave the order that would change galactic history forever, and the human armada began moving toward the light. The mining station on Kepler 4-4 had been operating peacefully for 20 years when Supervisor Jake Thompson noticed something strange on his long-range sensors. 3 large objects were approaching from the outer system, moving faster than any known Council ship could travel. At first he thought they might be asteroids, but asteroids did not change course or emit energy signatures that made his equipment scream warnings about unknown technology. Dr. Amy Harrison rushed to the sensor station when Jake called for her as the station's chief scientist. She had studied every type of ship in the galactic database, but these vessels matched nothing she had ever seen. Their design was sleek and predatory, like sharks built from metal and energy. The lead ship was transmitting a message in perfect galactic standard, which was impossible because no unknown species should know their language. The message came through clearly on all frequencies, spoken in a calm voice that somehow carried an undertone of absolute authority. "This is Commander Ryan Mitchell of the Human Expeditionary Force. We claim this system under the ancient right of return. Withdraw your operations immediately, or face the consequences." The transmission included legal codes and treaty references that dated back centuries, documents that had been erased from all official records. Jake Thompson had never heard of humans or the right of return, but something about the message made his blood run cold. These were not pirates or rebels making empty threats. The 3 ships hung motionless in space like weapons waiting to be fired, their hulls gleaming with technologies that his sensors could not properly identify. He sent an emergency signal to Council headquarters while ordering his staff to prepare for evacuation. The response from Fleet Admiral Vexter was swift and predictable. A battle group consisting of 12 heavy cruisers and 30 escort vessels jumped into the system within 6 hours. Their commanders confident that they were dealing with terrorists using stolen equipment. Admiral Vexter had crushed dozens of rebellions during his long career, and he saw no reason why this situation would be any different. Captain Rachel Stone watched the Council fleet arrive from the bridge of her flagship The human task force had grown to 15 ships while they waited, each one a masterpiece of military engineering that incorporated 2 centuries of technological advancement. Her crews were calm and focused, trained in combat techniques that no council officer had ever seen. They had been preparing for this moment their entire lives. The battle began when Admiral Vexter demanded the surrender of the human ships and received only silence in response. He ordered his fleet to attack, expecting quick victory against what he assumed were poorly armed criminals. The first council salvo lit up space with energy beams and missile contrails, but somehow every shot missed its target. The human ships moved like living creatures, dancing between the attacks with impossible grace. The human response was surgical in its precision. Captain Stone's weapons officers had studied council ship designs for decades, knowing exactly where to place their shots for maximum effect. Energy beams lanced out from human vessels, striking engine compartments and weapon systems with perfect accuracy. Council ships found themselves crippled and helpless, unable to fight back or escape. Dr. Harrison watched the battle from the mining station with growing amazement. The human ships were not trying to destroy the council fleet, but to disable it. Every shot was carefully aimed to cause the minimum casualties while rendering enemy vessels helpless. This was not the behavior of pirates or terrorists, but of a military force following strict rules of engagement. Admiral Vexter found his flagship surrounded by human vessels, their weapons trained on his bridge. A new transmission came through on his personal communication channel, and for the first time in his life, he heard genuine fear in his own voice as he answered. The human commander appeared on his screen, a middle-aged woman with calm eyes and the bearing of someone who had seen too much war. Captain Stone spoke quietly, but every word carried the weight of centuries of anger. Admiral Vexter, you are guilty of trespassing in human space and attacking vessels under the protection of the ancient treaties. Your fleet is now forfeit under galactic law, but we choose mercy over justice. You will withdraw immediately and carry our message back to your superiors. The transmission included thousands of pages of historical documents, treaty records, and legal precedents that proved humanity's original membership in the galactic community. Evidence of the Council's betrayal was laid out in precise detail, including records of meetings where human extinction had been planned and carried out. The galaxy would learn the truth about what had happened 3 centuries ago. Jake Thompson received permission to approach the human flagship under a flag of truce. He found himself face to face with Commander Mitchell, a man whose eyes held depths of knowledge and sadness that spoke of long exile and patient planning. The human commander explained that humanity had never been destroyed, only driven into hiding by council treachery. They had spent centuries preparing for this moment. The mining station was evacuated within hours, its personnel transferred to council ships that limped away from the system under human escort. The 3 human vessels remained behind, establishing the first official human presence in galactic space since the Exodus began. Their message was already spreading across the communication networks, reaching every world where younger species chafed under council rule. Dr. Harrison was the last to leave, her scientific mind fascinated by the implications of humanity's return. She had studied extinct civilizations her entire career, but she had never seen one come back from the dead. The humans were not the primitive refugees that council records described, but a sophisticated military force with technology that surpassed anything in known space. As the council fleet jumped away from Kepler 44 to be, Admiral Vexter knew that everything had changed. The galaxy's power structure, stable for centuries, was about to be torn apart by the return of a species that everyone thought was safely extinct. The humans had demonstrated their military superiority without firing a shot in anger, but their message was clear. The old order was ending, and a new age was about to begin. The news of humanity's return spread across the galaxy like wildfire, carried by quantum communications and whispered conversations in every spaceport cantina. On Sigma Draconis IV, rebellion leader Torgan rallied his oppressed people with stories of the legendary human fleet that had humbled a council battle group without losing a single ship. The younger species had grown tired of council domination, and humanity's dramatic return gave them hope that change was finally possible. Admiral Kate Morrison stood in the war room aboard the massive dreadnought Spirit of Earth, surrounded by holographic displays showing the positions of human forces throughout the galaxy. For months, her ships had been moving into position, hiding in asteroid fields and dark nebulae, while Council forces remained oblivious to their presence. The time had come to reveal the true scope of humanity's preparations. General Chris Parker had spent decades designing the combat doctrines that would give humanity victory against overwhelming odds. Council tactics relied on massive fleets and brute force attacks, but humans had learned to fight smarter rather than harder. Their new approach emphasized speed, precision, and psychological warfare designed to break enemy morale rather than simply destroying their ships. The human armada was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. While the Council built standardized vessels and massive shipyards, humans had constructed their fleet in secret facilities scattered across dozens of star systems. Each ship was a unique masterpiece, designed by different engineering teams but built to work together as a single organism. The result was a force that could adapt to any situation and overcome any defense. Colonel Peter Brooks commanded the special operations teams that had been infiltrating Council space for years. His soldiers had established contact with resistance movements on 40 different worlds, providing weapons and training to rebels who were ready to fight for their freedom. When Operation Daybreak began, these allies would strike at key installations, while the main human force engaged the Council fleet. Captain Emma Wilson reviewed her fighter squadron's mission parameters, while her pilots performed final equipment checks. The carrier New Liberty held over 200 of the most advanced fighter craft ever built, each one capable of outrunning and outgunning anything in the Council arsenal. Her pilots had trained in the harsh conditions of deep space, learning to fight in zero gravity and navigate through the most dangerous regions of the galaxy. The human colonies in the dark stars had become massive industrial complexes during the years of exile. Every asteroid had been mined, every planet terraformed, and every moon converted into a factory or shipyard. The productivity was staggering, allowing humanity to build a fleet that rivaled the combined naval forces of all Council species. But more importantly, they had built it in complete secrecy. Commander Tony Clark sent encrypted messages to resistance cells throughout Council space, coordinating their activities with the upcoming military operation. The humans were not just offering military support but hope for a better future. Their message was simple. The galaxy belonged to all species, not just the ones that the Council considered useful or controllable. Dr. Nicole Davis commanded the reconnaissance fleets that had been mapping Council defenses and gathering intelligence about their military capabilities. Her ships were invisible to enemy sensors, allowing them to observe Council activities without being detected. The information they gathered revealed that the Council was not as strong as they pretended to be, with many of their member species providing only token support. The planning for Operation Daybreak required coordination on a scale that no military force had ever attempted. 40 different star systems would be attacked simultaneously, with each assault timed to prevent the Council from organizing an effective response. Human commanders would have to trust their training and their equipment, because there would be no opportunity for reinforcement or retreat. Captain Gary Hill stood on the bridge of the dreadnought Starfire, watching his crew prepare for the largest battle in human history. His ship was one of 12 massive vessels that would spearhead the assault on the Council's home system, drawing their main fleet into a decisive engagement. While smaller, human forces liberated oppressed worlds throughout the galaxy. The psychological impact of humanity's return was already being felt across Council space. Species that had been loyal members for centuries began questioning their allegiance. When they learned about the betrayal that had led to human exile, the Council's claim to represent all galactic civilization rang hollow when evidence emerged that they had attempted genocide against an entire species. Admiral Morrison reviewed the final intelligence reports while counting down the hours until Operation Daybreak would begin. Council forces were scattered across too many systems, trying to maintain control over rebellions that grew stronger every day. Their military leaders were experienced, but predictable, following tactics that had worked for centuries, but were about to become obsolete. The human fleet began moving toward their jump points, each ship group following carefully planned routes that would bring them to their targets at exactly the right moment. There would be no room for error in the coming operation, because failure would mean not just military defeat, but the permanent extinction of humanity as an independent species. Captain Sandra Lee made final preparations aboard the assault ship Liberty Bell, knowing that her forces would be among the first to engage Council defenders. Her troops were descendants of the original Exodus survivors, trained from birth to be warriors in the struggle that would determine their species' fate. They carried with them the hopes and dreams of everyone who had died during the long years of exile. As the countdown reached its final minutes, every human in the fleet understood that they were about to make history. The galaxy had forgotten that humanity existed, dismissing them as legends and myths. But legends could become reality, and the human armada was about to light up the sky with the fire of their return. The Zentara system had been the heart of galactic civilization for over 1,000 years, but it had never seen anything like the sight that greeted the morning shift workers on the orbital platforms. Admiral Kate Morrison's armada dropped out of hyperspace in perfect formation, 3,000 ships strong, their hulls reflecting the light of the system's twin stars like a constellation of deadly angels. Even the Council's war correspondents stopped running long enough to record the moment before fleeing for their lives. Captain Gary Hill coordinated the attack from the bridge of the dreadnought Starfire, his tactical displays showing the positions of every ship in the human fleet. The Council's home defense force was massive, but poorly positioned, spread across multiple orbital zones in a formation designed more for ceremony than combat. Human ships moved with the precision of a symphony orchestra, each vessel playing its part in a deadly dance that had been rehearsed for decades. The Council's numerical advantage meant nothing when their commanders had no experience fighting an enemy that refused to follow their tactical doctrines. Admiral Zorik Stahl led the defense from his flagship Eternal Glory, a massive vessel that had been designed to inspire fear in primitive species. His shields flickered and died under the focused fire of 6 human cruisers, their weapons cutting through his defenses like they were made of paper. Dr. Kira Thane watched from the research station, where she had been studying human artifacts for months. The irony was not lost on her that she was probably the only council member who truly understood what they were facing. These were not the primitive refugees described in official records, but the descendants of explorers and dreamers who had spent centuries preparing for this moment. The first human troops to land on Zentara Prime were led by Colonel Sandra Lee, whose grandmother had been part of the original Exodus. She carried with her a crystal data storage device containing every treaty, every agreement, and every piece of evidence proving humanity's rightful place in galactic civilization. The planet's surface defenses crumbled before the advancing human forces, their soldiers moving with a combination of advanced technology and centuries of suppressed rage. Commander Julie Adams broadcast humanity's message to every world in the galaxy from her command ship, New Democracy. The transmission was simple and direct. Humans had not come as conquerors, but as liberators, offering protection to any species willing to join a new galactic order based on equality rather than subjugation. The response was immediate and overwhelming, with dozens of species pledging support for the human cause. The psychological impact of the Armada's arrival was as devastating as its military effectiveness. Council member species who had served loyally for generations suddenly found themselves questioning everything they had been told about galactic history. The humans had provided proof that the Council's version of events was built on lies and murder, destroying the foundation of their authority. Captain Emma Wilson led her fighter squadrons in a series of surgical strikes against the Council's orbital weapon platforms. Her pilots flew with the skill of artists and the determination of people who had trained their entire lives for this single battle. The platforms exploded in brilliant flashes of light that illuminated the planet below, announcing to everyone that the old order was ending. Admiral Morrison received surrender offers from 12 different Council fleets within the first hour of battle. The human commander was generous in victory, accepting surrenders and offering safe passage to any enemies who laid down their weapons. This was not a war of extermination, but a revolution designed to create a better future for all species. The liberation of Zentara Prime took less than 6 hours, with human forces capturing every major government building and communication center on the planet. Council leaders who had ruled the galaxy for centuries found themselves prisoners of the species they had tried to destroy. The trial records and evidence of genocide that humans presented were so overwhelming that even loyal Council supporters could not deny the truth. Captain Tony Clark established the first human embassy on Zentara Prime in the building that had once housed the Council's Department of Species Management. The symbolism was deliberate and powerful. The organization that had planned humanity's extinction was being replaced by diplomats dedicated to protecting the rights of all species. The galaxy would never be the same. The younger species responded to humanity's message with enthusiasm that surprised even the human leadership. Rebellions that had been simmering for decades suddenly exploded into full revolution as oppressed peoples realized that they finally had powerful allies. The Council's military forces found themselves fighting wars on hundreds of fronts simultaneously. With no hope of victory, Dr. Amy Harrison worked frantically to establish communication protocols with the dozens of species that were requesting human protection. Her translation computers had never been designed to handle so many different languages at once, but somehow they managed to facilitate the conversations that would reshape galactic politics. The age of Council domination was ending, replaced by something that no one had imagined possible. Admiral Morrison stood in the ruins of the Galactic Council chamber, surrounded by representatives of 47 species who had come to negotiate a new future. The old order was dead, but something better was being born from its ashes. The humans had proven that legends could become reality, that even the darkest exile could lead to triumphant return. The sky above Zentara Prime burned bright with the light of human ships, their hulls gleaming like stars as they established orbital positions around the planet. Children on dozens of worlds looked up and saw the lights that marked the beginning of a new age. The humans had returned, not just to reclaim their place among the stars, but to ensure that no species would ever again face the choice between submission and extinction. As the last Council resistance collapsed, the galaxy prepared for a future that would be written by all species together, rather than dictated by a few. The human armada had lit up the sky with more than just weapons and engines. They had illuminated the darkness of oppression with the fire of hope, proving that sometimes the greatest victories come not from conquering enemies, but from liberating friends.